let's get to the reason we're all here tonight. Amy Jo Kim. I've gotten to know her over the years, and I'm proud to call her a friend of mine. And, we've spoken at similar events, and she's spoken at the Meetup before. This is her, I think, third time, if I'm counting properly. Excellent. Welcome to the Three-Timer Club. And, what I love about her is she's kind of ended up kind of in the product world, but her path there was through kind of more game design. And being a startup coach, she worked on games that we all know and love, like Rock Band, which I still love to pull out and play, The Sims, Netflix, Ultima Online as well. She's got a PhD in behavioral neuroscience, that she really knows what she's talking about. She wrote this book, Game Thinking, and she, has master classes and workshops that she teaches. You can learn more about her at amyjokim.com and gamethinking.com. And she's going to talk to us today. That's what I always love hearing her talk, because the similarities and overlaps with what it takes to create a great, compelling game are very similar to what it takes to create a successful product. So I'm really excited to hear what she has to tell us tonight. So Amy Jo, with that, please take it away.
Thanks everyone for being here. I'm excited to go deep on one specific tool, because I'm guessing the people here you're builders, you make stuff. You really care about the value you can get and the results you can get out of the tools in education. Does anybody agree with that? Am I making the right assumption? Type it into the chat. I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions, but do you feel like you are practical builder person, like to get things done? Yes, you assume correctly. Yes, thank you. I want to talk to you about a particular roadmap tool. Us product leaders, product managers, producers in the games industry, everybody who ships complex digital products and services, we need to deal with roadmaps, and we need to change our roadmaps. They don't stay static, right? So I'm going to show you a particular approach to doing a roadmap that in many ways is counterintuitive, as you'll see, but can, one, save you a huge amount of time and a lot of headaches, two, meaningfully impact your team's ability to innovate smarter, and three, help you drive retention and fix it when you have a leaky bucket. So let's dive in. First of all, have you ever struggled with retention on a project? Tell me, say yes, or tell me a little more in the chat. Yes, yes. Anybody else? Has retention ever been an issue for you? Yes, Matt says yes. And Scott and Don, yes. So especially as you go deeper into your career as a product manager, as a product leader, as a digital creator, you'll find that retention is both the most important thing and the hardest thing. And it's really tough to build lasting retention. Most products and services don't. It's the rare ones that do, right? But it's what most of us aspire to when we're, especially if we're in the SaaS world or any kind of employee engagement. That's the goal. So I have helped dozens, hundreds at this point of teams drive retention. And I've worked on a diverse set of innovative hits that managed to do that. eBay was one of the first complex marketplaces I worked on. And at that time, what people were struggling with and needed to get better at was finding trustworthy sellers and trustworthy buyers, making that all work. Ultima Online, another hit I worked on, very unlikely hit, early MMO, was really about empowering people to live out an increasingly rich and detailed fantasy. The Sim, also a product I worked on from idea to ship, was really, we didn't know what it was at first. We did a lot of experiments, but people really wanted to experiment with this family simulator toy in all kinds of ways that were deeply meaningful. Rock Band, basically you want to play songs that you love with friends, or sometimes play it by yourself with accompaniment. Netflix, another product I worked on, is really about delivering better and better customized recommendations through your interaction with the system. Happify, it's really about taking control of and lifting up your mood and not just being burdened by your own moods. Tonal, anybody use Tonal or heard of Tonal? It's like Peloton for weightlifting for in-home. Worked with the Tonal folks on what really customers care about. And often, as I'm sure many of you know, what you think customers care about isn't always what they care about. And it's finding that sweet spot and discovering the truth that's the heart of all of this, the heart of making retention work. In covet fashion, any covet fashion players or people who know people, that's a fashion game. People put together and judge high fashion outfits. That's what they wanted to do most of the time, and often aspirationally, play with clothes you can't afford. Each of these innovative hits was very unlikely, and each of them managed to drive lasting retention among a certain group of people. And you can too. That's what today's about. It is possible, not easy. So why do we care so much about retention? Well, it's pretty simple. It takes time, energy, and dollars to acquire customers. And if they don't stick around, all of that goes to waste. Nobody sets out to build a leaky bucket. Nobody wants to do that, but it happens a lot. Has anybody ever worked on a project that turned out to be a leaky bucket? A lot of people coming in, not a lot sticking around. Yes, Shane, it's so painful. Oh, so yes, tell me more. How do you fix that? Yikes, it's really hard. Or even better, how do you, as a product leader, prevent your team from building a leaky bucket? Can you actually head that off at the pass? Is it possible? Well, you're about to find out. So let me tell you a story. Imagine for a moment that you had an always on AI friend in your pocket who you could talk with anytime that really understood you. Imagine that. Well, brilliant team imagined that. They had a compelling vision and the ability to build. They raised over $12 million from top tier Silicon Valley VCs. They shipped a chatbot with a great launch, great PR, millions of downloads, 2.5 million to be exact, in the first few weeks. Sounds good, right? 7 months later, they had frighteningly low retention. And they didn't know how to fix it. They had tried a number of 6-week sprints to fix it with different hypotheses. None of them worked. That is a scary place to be. Maybe you've been there too. And like Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face, right? So that was really hard. And after their third failed sprint, their VC introduced them to me and we started working together. So the reality is it's actually really hard to drive sustained retention. As I mentioned before, a lot of times, and it was true with this team, you think that tracking and rewarding behavior might be the secret. If you've read The Power of Habit, which is what the chart on the left is from, or Hooked, I know Nir's been a guest here, which is the chart on the right, those are both essentially tracking and rewarding behavior. That's what both of those are built around. That's called behavior modification or Skinnerian psychology. But after you try it, you discover that if it's not hooked into what customers care about, Skinner box mechanics will backfire. They don't just not work. They work at first and then they backfire. And that's what the Replica team found, because one of their sprints was to drive better retention. They added points and badges and they were very cute and people really liked them. Everybody was like, oh, these are cool. Boy, did they not help their 30-day retention numbers. In fact, they made them worse. Right. Let's just gamify it. So that was frustrating and depressing, and the team was stuck. And then we used the game thinking process and the roadmap I'm going to tell you about to get them unstuck. There's 3 main sprints that are connected. It all works together as a system. Those of you who have the book or get the book, you'll see it's all laid out. The first sprint is discovery. Now, there's lots of kinds of discovery. Here, we focus on clarifying your hypothesis because you're going to run experiments and identifying your superfans. Not everybody in your market, but your hot core, high need early adopters. So for Replica, this chatbot, we clarified their hypothesis and found that their mental model was all over the place. They kind of wanted the product to be everything to everyone. Sound familiar? Have you ever run into that? Ever run into wanting that, or maybe working with someone who wanted the product to be everyone to everything? So we really had to say what it wasn't, which was very painful. And we did that by digging into our numbers and finding out who was sticking around and identifying hardcore superfans who didn't just like it, but needed it. And these superfans, these pre-chasm superfans, they gave us the product focus we needed. And by really understanding them and their struggling moments and their motivations, we also had a set of motivations and behaviors and habits that we could leverage in a redesign. That made all the difference. That led us into our design sprint. Here, we focused on designing a learning loop and a customer journey. These two together is what drives retention. Let me break it down. You first step back and ask yourself, and you can do this right now with your project, how can you help your customers make progress? Well, of course, you have to know who your customers are first. But once you do, once you understand them better and what they're looking for that your product can solve, what does it mean to help them make progress? Not just track and reward behavior, but make progress. Well, often you're solving a very real problem for a small high need group. That's where you get started, like Slack, for instance. That's where Slack got started. And the way you build a mastery path around that is to think about how that product experience that you're going to unfold for your customers over time as they use it gets better, as the customer gets more into it and becomes more skilled. It's the essence of designing for progress, whether it's an MMO game or a SaaS product or a toy. And then ideally, a smart way to think about it, and we absolutely did this with Replica, is think about re-engagement. That's the learning loop, which you see outlined here. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. But you want to think about creating this journey, a customer journey around an existing habit if you can. And that's where knowing your super fans and studying them comes in helpful. One of the secrets to driving engagement and re-engagement is to really fit into your customers' lives. And if you can build around an existing habit or make it better or replace it, that can be a great technique. And that leads us into the third sprint after we've really done discovery on our customers and our value prop, and then sketched out this journey design and a re-engagement loop. Time for validation. Okay, rubber hits the road. Test our idea in rough form so that people aren't dazzled by graphics. And here, for instance, on Rock Band, this was an early session, and these weren't our ultimate target customers. These were super fans. These were rhythm action gamers who'd already played our earlier game, Guitar Hero. So the beachhead isn't the destination. You want to validate your idea with a subsection of customers. And then you want to use those test results, because it's an experiment, to update your hypotheses about what your product is and if it's what customers want and need. And in doing that, you create a roadmap that shows what you're going to focus on when to fix your engagement issues or drive them from the ground up. This is the game thinking roadmap. Let's break it down. Along the top, along the x-axis here, we have the customer journey. Okay, and this is a model we use. You have discovery, which is about attracting and informing visitors, people who haven't really gotten into it yet. You have onboarding, which is about engaging and educating newcomers, people that are new and learning the ropes. You have habit building, which is about re-engaging regulars. That's where you really design for re-engagement. And then you have mastery, which is about empowering experts and enthusiasts, the 2 to 5% of people that really go deep and can often add a lot of value back to your system. Then here along the y-axis, we have the developer's journey, our journey. It starts often with ideas, maybe, tiny experiments, but at some point you're going to build an MVP, some sort of test, something that's not the full product, but meant to test. That will, after some iterations, go into some kind of beta testing where you're largely feature complete, but getting the bugs out, scaling, that sort of thing. Then there's launch. That's the final product. But as we all know these days, that's just the beginning, right? Because there's expansion, improvements, tweaks, et cetera. So that's the developer's journey in a nutshell. And the punchline of this whole talk and the counterintuitive thing is, you start here, you start with habit building, you start with re-engagement, not with fancy onboarding, not with 20 levels of, well worked out rewards and points for your mastery, but you start with the hardest part. Why do you do that? Well, first of all, I noticed a pattern because I've worked with hundreds of teams, but what, 8 or 9 worldwide hits, okay? Including Slack. They started with a learning loop early on. So did Rock Band. So did The Sims. So did Covet Fashion. So did Happify. Why is this a good practice for product leaders and product managers? This is why. Basic system thinking. A complex system that works is invariably found to have evolved from a simple system that works. I bet some of you right now are going, oh, you better believe it, because you've probably worked on projects that were way too complex, that didn't get the simple core functionality really strong first. That's not a good situation to be in, is it? This is how you can use the game thinking roadmap in practice on the front lines to make your projects go 10x better. In your MVP, because everybody specs out their MVPs in one way or another, mostly do habit building. Test and tune your learning loop, your re-engagement loop. The thing that's going to make people come back on day 21. Do you do no onboarding? Of course not. You do just enough, because during your MVP, you don't need all the fancy onboarding. You need just enough, but you do need to tune that loop. When you get closer to beta, you're going to be refining your onboarding more, continuing to refine that learning loop. And as you get closer to launch, that's when you ramp up discovery, right? Because that's when you really want to bring people in. Doesn't mean you don't run tiny experiments to tune your messaging, but you don't ramp up discovery really early on, because then it just doesn't make sense. And if you haven't gotten that strong loop, that re-engagement loop, the whole thing's a leaky bucket by definition. And you continue refining these as you head into launch, but you've set the foundations earlier. Then during expansion, again, counterintuitively, is when you really work on mastery. And this comes out of my experience in game design. A lot of people that aren't experienced in game design, maybe they're gamers, they've played a lot, they think that all the stuff you see, all the levels and all the, character customization, all the fun stuff, right? They think that's what game design's all about. And if the game gets popular, you expand it and a lot of stuff comes along. But game design is much more about the stuff you can't see. And if that stuff doesn't work, the studios aren't going to greenlight the game to build all the fancy stuff around it. So you'll be thinking about mastery earlier than this, but expansion and launch is really when that stuff comes into play for most products. So that's in practice how every hit I've worked on came to life. And this model worked for Replica. Replica did an intensive set of these 3 sprints, and they were able to find a core audience, tune their model, and really rise to the ranks. And part of it was they went all in on being a health and fitness app. They're a mental health app rather than trying to be everything to everybody. So the mental model was basically an understanding friend who gets to know you. We developed an avatar system, a sort of voice chat emulator too. By the way, this opened up some monetization opportunities with the virtual close. But this avatar was also able to nudge you toward healthier activities because it's a mental health app. So it's not just fooling around. It's, let's take a walk. I'll be with you and I'll be proud of you for leaving the house. Based on what you just heard, what do you think is the most common number one engagement mistake that even really smart, experienced product managers and product leaders make? Any guesses? What's running through your mind right now? What's a really common mistake? Something I've touched on. Well, think about it. I will just reveal. Creating an onboarding experience without having a compelling re-engagement loop. In other words, a reason to return. Raise your hands, say hello, holla at me in the chat if you've ever experienced that. Ever been on a project that did that? I have so many times. Oh my gosh, so many clients that come to me have done that. And they're like, why? Why aren't people sticking around? So if you get one thing out of this, I want you to remember that. It's so common. Oh, we don't have time. Just make the onboarding nice. That's what's important. I went to a talk and I heard onboarding was important, right? So how do you solve this problem? How can you and your team solve this problem? Well, I showed you one powerful tool, which actually has tendrils to a lot of other tools, but just that one tool for planning purposes can be a huge time saver and really help you improve your ability to drive long-term engagement. Starts by asking yourself, and try this with your team. What do our hottest of the hot core customers, our most important customers, what is it they want to get better at through interacting with what we're doing in their lives, not just in the tool? So for Replica, the way we answered that was want to get better at managing my mood and anxiety. That was the problem we decided to solve among the many others. Here's a use case. It's 1 a.m. Who can I talk to? I don't want to bother my friends. We really made sure that that existing habit that lots of our users had, we could have a very good solution for. See how that all fits together? So what do they get better at? When I feel anxious, I can reach for my Replica. You get better at feeling better, at managing your own mood, your own mental health. So these are techniques that you can use early in your process. You can also use it to fix games that have shipped, like we did with Replica. But if you're starting a new process, try this. I encourage you to try it because, as Frank Lloyd Wright says, you can use an eraser on the drafting table or a sledgehammer on the construction site. And we want to make more mistakes and learn more on the drafting table. And the game thinking roadmap will help you do that. Now, if you want more, you can get the game thinking book. Everything is available at gamethinking.io, and it's not gamethinking.com, sorry. And then on that same site, we've got several programs. We have a boot camp that runs a few times a year. It's a 5-day crash course, very popular. That's coming up in July. And we also have a 6-month training program for very popular with teams, also open to individuals, to learn these techniques and really bring them to your organization and level up your own skills as a product leader. So you can feel free to check those out as well. That's gamethinking.io/programs.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy Jo. That was great.